Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Michael. I'm the GM of Mastering.com, and today I am speaking with Livingston. He's one of my favorite up-and-coming young self-producing artists, and today he's breaking down his viral smash hit, Shadow. So in this interview, Livingston's going to take us through his production session. We're going to dive into everything, vocal processing, how he EQs, how he compresses, all of that, and he drops some incredible wisdom on how to get massive sounding songs without using too many layers and overloading your mix. So it's a great interview. You're not going to want to miss it. So without further ado, here's Livingston. All right, cool. So let's start at the very beginning. If you can, maybe just start with giving us a little 30-second taste of the chorus, just so we can all get acclimated to the song real quick.
Totally. So, chorus of Shadow comes out of this big pre-hook into.
Kill your pride. Turn your fear to a weapon. And don't you forget it. Oh, don't you let him take control. Don't you let him break your soul. It's not the devil at your door. It's just your shadow on the floor.
So that's what we got from the chorus.
So freaking good, dude. Oh man,
Thank you.
I'm so excited to dig in. So, all right, so if you can start us at the very beginning, where did this song come from? What was kind of the first thing that came with this?
Sure. So I really love to start on simple elements. I like to start on just a melodic element. Sometimes it's more kinetic. Like in this case, it was this piano right here. Really light, just two chords. Kind of haunting minor thing. And a couple weeks before this, I had actually gone to Atomic Records in LA, and I'd gone crate digging, and I was listening to a bunch of incredible old soul records, and I heard I won't say the name of the song, but I heard an amazing background vocal ooh melody, and it wasn't quite this, but it felt haunting. And I realized that my brain kind of combined that melody with something fresh, and it worked on top of these two chords. So the song started with just this piano and this ooh melody, which was a Genesis Children's Choir VST patch. And I was like, I thought it was really weird that instead of starting on the it started on the. I was like, that's just a strange note to start it on, and it just automatically makes your eyebrow go like, huh?
Yeah.
Like it's a little weird, but then you adapt to it, and it's satisfying when you make the full round around the 4 bar.
It gives you that kind of that turning in your stomach type of feeling, which, if I'm correct in my understanding of the song, is this about mental health, and it's about fear and anxiety and those types of things, right?
Yeah, so this is an evolution of just I dealt with so many years where I just couldn't get out of my head,
Yeah.
and I tried so many different ways to attack that with songs. Like there were ones that were sad, there were ones that were really angry and heavy. I made this song Carnival when I was much younger. I was like 14, and it was kind of sarcastic, and that one felt the closest to kind of getting it out of my system, and this felt almost like an evolved version of that song Carnival because it's this kind of confident, like I'm not gonna let you under my skin the way that I used to. And when we wrote this, it was very much like, hey, can it be a little haunting and a little spooky without being too on the
Yeah.
nose? And so the whole song was like balancing that.
It's spooky, but you don't want to stop listening at any point. It's still catchy. That's the immediate thing. It's I want to listen to more of it, but it does give you a little bit of that kind of feeling, you know? Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt myself, but if you're watching this video and you're thinking to yourself, hey, I kind of want to start producing music myself, but you don't know where to start, then I've got an amazing opportunity for you. We are giving away a free 7-day trial to our Mastering.com membership program. It's got everything that you need to get started in music production, introductory courses, as well as intermediate and advanced programs as well as direct access to real production mentors who can coach you throughout the entire process. So if you're interested in this, if this is something that you want to try out, click below and you can get a free trial of mastering.com membership for 7 days. It's risk-free. If you don't like it, you can cancel, but go ahead and give it a shot. Music production is an amazing journey, and I would love to see you get started because of a video like this. So go ahead and click that link below, get started with your 7-day free trial, and I'll see you inside.
And then also in the intro, to back up those two, I just had these alternate pianos. I'm sure one of these is addictive, one of these is keyscape, and then the three together plus the choir is the whole intro. It looks like we used I'm a big fan of the Acoustica stuff, so we used, I think it's pronounced taupe, on this one. I also love this Metric Halo Channel Strip 3. I heard somewhere that Servan used it, and I just started using it as kind of the only additive EQ on the whole album. And I like it because it's not so granular like Q3. I feel like when I'm looking at Pro Q3, it's really easy to kind of look at the heat maps and the frequencies and be like, oh, I have let's like notch out and not think about it really musically, but think about it very surgically. And with Metric Halo, I feel like the curves are just set up to feel really musical and really dramatic, just built in. You know what I mean?
Q3, I always say it's like going through someone's dirty laundry, because you open it up and it's like this really embarrassing EQ because you're notching out like little tiny sections and stuff like that. Do you always use virtual instruments, or do you do a mix of analog and virtual? Or?
So it's shifted more and more towards analog or towards just really cool VST patches that I find throughout the multiverse. I'm a big fan of all the orchestral tools stuff. Berlin or Berlin strings specifically, I'm a huge fan of. And then obscure choir libraries and all the choir stuff and the Tron stuff in Omnisphere is just amazing, and there's so many weird ways to use it that I find myself going there a lot too.
Sweet. So you've got this. I'm assuming at this point you're like, okay, this is cool, right?
Yeah.
Where do you go from there?
So we wrote the whole verse on top of that, just the one on the clock, one eye on me, we take a step. We just felt like it should pocket with the piano and just have the choir cut off. And I had this kind of really small version of what ended up being the chorus drums, and I just left that with the piano, and the whole verse ended up just being on this. And it was just a loop that I bounced out from drums that I did on my MPC 3000. And the story of these drums is funny. I had an MPC that I bought just when I was a fanboy of all the 90s and early 2000s hip hop production that was done on that. And I bought it and instantly realized that it was broken. And so I sent it to Bruce Forat, who still works on Ventura, and literally didn't see the machine for 2 years. Not his fault, my fault. I shipped it off and just like never ended up getting it back. But when I finally moved to LA, I realized I was 10 minutes from his synth spot on Ventura. So I called him and I was like, "Hey, do you still have that MPC lying around?" And I went in, and it's just like analog synth heaven.
Yeah.
His place, right? And it's just he was like, "Yeah, those are like those ASR 10s were used by Timbaland on like every single." I was like, "This is ridiculous." And he hands me the fixed MPC, but he's got this little micro SD card, and it's like a unbelievable sound card with banks that he's just collected over years. And I think it'd probably be fitting to show you the full groove that ends up being the chorus groove, because that's what comprises the verse drums. But I kind of tried to wall myself off from using too many digital samples and just kind of build this whole groove on the MPC. I'll mute basses. Where are you? There we go. And it's just all these really thick, weird samples from the MPC. Think he has all these FX and strange risers that were on that card, so I tried to use those. Like I thought It's like that's just super weird. It like travels to my right ear.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have is
Weird.
there like a bit crusher on those drums too? Because that was the thing I noticed in the
Yes.
intro is that you've got this super ethereal sounding kind of oohs and ahs, and then you've got this kind of super digital kind of distorted drum, which I
Yep.
thought was really cool.
So just bounced out that whole MPC groove from the hook.
Mm.
Have this preset over the top on Decimort too. Love Decimort because I think it has this character where it can kind of help something that feels a little dull and dry. It just really gives some brightness and some kind of dirty, some like dirty high end
Yeah.
to the top of whatever you put it on. So we had that and put a little two-way, compressing it more than I probably should have.
Can you bypass those just so we could hear what it sounds like
Yeah.
before you did that?
So it would just be the whole groove.
Mm.
That's the whole groove minus the effects and then with the effects.
Wow.
And I really just liked that kind of all the way in the back at the end of the second bar. It's the like it just kind of really digs in and feels metallic, and it almost has this kind of shovel-y, like
Hmm.
trotting graveyard kind of feel to it. And it just made it feel haunting against how pretty and kind of strange the piano felt. Um, and then also on this verse, what I was really debating leaving this in or not, because it was an accident at first. I put a just a vocal synth to I don't know what patch, just one of the stock patches on MIDI mode under the lead vocal, and it just stayed pedal on the first chord for the whole verse.
Foot in the ground, 1 foot
Mm.
in the grave. Don't you dare make a sound. Hear you from a mile away. Run
And I
from
was
the
like,
town.
I gotta follow the chord pattern. It felt super weird. But then every time I would add the second chord to follow what the piano was doing, I'd be like, it doesn't feel haunting anymore. Like it's not strange enough.
It's got the
Because
same
when you
texture as that MPC loop too. It's got that kind of granular kind of it lives in that
yeah,
same world.
I think it's whatever granular, there's some sort of granular distortion just built into some of
Yeah.
these vocoder modules in Vocal Synth 2. And I also like Vocal Synth 2 sometimes compared to Avox Harmonizer because uh, it's it's dirtier. Like
Yeah.
you can hear it poke out versus sometimes you use Harmonizer and it's just so big and so lush. And you're like, in theory, I mean, this is louder. This is putting out more sound. I should be able to hear it, but it's so dense and it's in the low mid so much that it doesn't poke through. Versus vocal synth on its own can sound really ugly, but in context with the vocals, it just helps kind
So
of.
Foot in the ground, one
Oh,
foot in the
so sorry.
grave.
What were
Don't
you
you
saying?
quick question. So do you have the lyrics at this point, or do you develop this kind of spooky vibe and then say, okay, I need to write to this, or did it come the other way around? Did you have an idea of where you wanted to go with it when you started?
Spencer and I wrote the verse first, just on top of the piano and the ooh melody. Like we had that piano start
Okay.
with the kind of that choir ooh, and then just soloed it before I had these drums as well, actually, because I remember I did these drums with my buddy later. He was like sitting on the couch. It's funny. It's such a weird memory because I had this friend that was living in LA with us, and he was just hanging out, and I did all the drums later, and so we had the piano and the ooh melody, and then the whole verse was just written on top of that, and then we didn't do the chorus until after the verse was written.
Okay. So it wasn't like you came into this saying like a song's gonna be called Shadow and it's gonna be about this and this. You kind of developed the vibe first and then wrote over that.
I had tried Shadow as a concept on a couple different songs
Ah.
over a couple years, and it never really landed.
Mm.
And I think once we felt that this was kind of a spookier, darker thing, it kind of opened up like, hey, should we try stabbing at this again? Um, because it felt like an internal, like the way it's not saying I in the verse is 1 foot in the ground, 1 foot in the grave. Don't you dare make a sound. Hear you from a mile away. Run from the town. All you need is your name and the sweat on your brow and the blood running through your veins. It's kind of this to the listener,
Mm-hmm.
tense, anxious trod through like it just you can kind of see the dead of night thing. And I was like, it might be cool to kind of go there. But it really took shape when we went into the pre-chorus that we were like, yeah, this is Shadow because of the big contrast between
Yeah.
the sections.
Sweet. Yeah, let's keep going then.
So, um, the pre is my favorite part of the song because it's just so tense and it gives you a bunch right at the front and then it pulls it way back. So it started with these huge bass and string swells. And then I added some Berlin and CSS on top of that.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, that feels it's so much fun because it feels like a movie trailer a little bit. And if I'm not mistaken, don't quote me on this. I think one of these is VST and one of these is a Moog where I was doing a weird filter pass and then doing a tape stop on it. I
Yeah,
would wager this is the Moog one.
it's like the song is breathing. It's like you get this big pop of energy and then it gets sucked back out, and it dude, it's
Yeah,
super tense.
it's really weird. And sometimes I think I'm guilty of going too cinematic with the
Mm.
production just because I'm such a big fan of Hans Zimmer and those guys. And I remember when I was 16, I don't know how this happened. This was like it's crazy random side quest thing that happened, but I got to meet with one of my heroes who's a composer named John Powell,
Mm.
and he did all the How to Train Your Dragons and a bunch of the DreamWorks,
Those
just
are amazing.
legendary
Yeah.
soundtracks. And he was like, the something you need to think about with your instrumentals is really deliberate moments of contrast, where you're creating something. If you're going to do something it sounds obvious, but it's like if you're going to do something really, really heavy, pull it back and do something light after, just to show the breadth of the emotion that you're trying to convey. And also, if you're trying to say something big, try to do it with as few elements as possible. So I was like, you know what? Over the years, it would look, it felt like that would be easier to actually implement. But
Yeah.
sometimes, like we were talking about before, it's easy to just throw everything at the wall, and then be like, wait, what was the original idea that I had for this? Versus with this, I was like, I'm gonna commit to this big downbeat, and then just have these tense, tremolo and the wind down bass on the downbeats, and then just kind of have these tense pizzicato and spiccato strings riding out the middle and just fully commit to the cinematic thing.
Can you take us through that one more time? I just need to hear that again one more time.
Sure,
Going
yeah.
through there.
Yeah, just through the sounds.
Yeah, just through the
Totally.
pre again. Yeah.
Yep. So it's just these trims on the bass and just
Mm.
did a stock Logic tape wind down on those basses. And then in the middle, put these just really tense spick and staccato. I remember when I printed these, there's wrong notes all over that.
Mm.
You can hear it like even in the different stems. There's notes from one chord that sustain over the next. It's not nuanced. It's just like it's kind of the same thing as the verse where the vocoder, the first chord
Yeah.
sustain, just felt like it should last longer, even though it totally should go to the second chord. Every time I changed my messed up notes, or tried to quantize it too much or whatever, or have it obey the chord structure, it took all the life out of it because it's like this is the one sound you get in between the trem strings and in between the bass, and it's almost like if you don't have something a little
Yeah, yeah.
strange about it, it's like just super digital.
It's cool too because you've got this super low end and then you've got the strings sitting up in the high end, and it leaves this amazing space for your vocal. Like I now am itching to hear your vocals in that
Sure.
pre-chorus.
So if I play all the instrumental together,
Yeah.
the initial instinct for what to do with the vocal here was flipped what it ended up being, because in my head I was like, wait, the huge low bass, maybe this should be the lighter vocal,
Mm.
and then I should do the oh it like the walk up in between, like the don't think twice. Have it flipped because I was like, if you have all that space, shouldn't the chest come through there? And I was like, but what if you almost have the vocal supplement the bass in between where the bass is?
Dude.
And that's where we had the vocal switch come in.
Oh man,
So
that gets me
I'll
fired up because
play.
it makes such a difference because it's like you're whispering in your ear in those in betweens. And if you were,
It's super ASMR because it's
mhm.
like you get this flush of bass and then it gets pulled back, but you have the vocal, like those frequencies in the vocal kind of supplementing it. So I'll play that.
Don't think twice. You'll be dead in a second. Turn your eyes from your hands to the heavens. Kill your pride. Turn your fear to a weapon. And don't you forget it. Don't think twice.
And I don't even think we affected them differently. I guess I assumed I'd put a sound shifter on there. In fact, there may be one on a bus. Let's find out. Yeah, there's a sound shifter on a bus, just really lightly reinforcing those low.
Yeah, I want to get into your vocal processing at some
Dead
point.
in a second.
Yeah,
Turn
no,
your
I'm happy to do
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah.
at this stage. Sure.
I'm super curious because you've got, I mean, a powerhouse voice as it is, right? So I'm curious
Thank you.
what you do with it. Because yeah, I'm just super curious. You could take us through maybe a little bit of that
Sure.
chain.
So my vocal chain is wrong in every way. Don't copy it. It's probably so disrespectful to like the conventions of like what a good vocal chain should do, which is like preserve real emotion and dynamic and that kind of stuff. But I saw enough producers that I loved just go so heavy on like the multi-stage compression and on the saturation, and I was like, you know what, let's just lean all the way in on it with a track this heavy. I want the vocal to be present. I want it to punch through and feel really aggressive. And ironically, what I was doing at the time is I had at the time a Telefunken U47,
Mm,
which is like a warmer, more natural tone. And what I realized after I'd bought the 47 is I really wanted to see it 100.
mm.
Like, but it was too late. Like the cat was out of the bag. Like the 47 was set up. I was used to treating it a certain way. So I just end up recording on a 47 for this whole album, but desperately trying to make it sound like a C800 by just blasting air on it. So walking through the chain, uh, I have a ton of mouth noise, so I just cut out the mouth noise first with D-Click. Tuning looked heavy on this one, and I just use either the Waves or the UAD SSL channel, usually for my low cut, which it literally doesn't even look like it's engaged on this channel, which is amazing.
It's
That's
interesting because
awesome.
it doesn't sound super tuned. Like it doesn't have that auto tuning effect either. Like you said, the tuning was pretty heavy on this, but I imagine like a lot of it is your natural kind of vibrato, and then it's just kind of, I guess, maybe
Well, let's
locking that
find
in a bit.
out. It's also probably because it's a pedal note as well. And I think a lot of these parameters look like they were either walked back or just reset over. Let's see. So here's with just the,
You'll be dead in a second.
yeah, so that's just with,
From your hands.
yeah, let's take everything off except, well, let's just do the whole dry and then work our way
Ooh,
up.
that's vulnerable.
You'll be dead in a second. From your hands to the heavens. Turn your fear to a weapon.
I
All
think
right.
I was an inch away from the mic.
Yeah,
I
dude,
think
it
that's
sounds good though.
it. That was the. It's another thing people ask because I get questions about my vocal chain a lot, and again, like zero position to give advice. These are like not conventionally good vocal chains, but
If it sounds good,
I've
it is
always
good.
recorded. I've always recorded so close to the mic, like 5 inches or closer, and in this case, probably I was probably destroying my capsule. I was
Yeah,
so close.
mouth around the
Um,
mic.
yeah, eating the mic. Not so weird. A Q3 curve looks like I just did the low cut with this. Um, I've always used, this for years. I've just always used a 2A over a 76. I just switched to using a 76 in the last year. Just because I feel like I can get a little more granular with it with the attack and release, but this natural kind of however the 2A tends to affect vocals with compression just always felt nice to that 47. So I
Mm.
just kind of always commit to that. Um,
Are you doing any
and I,
processing to the vocals on the way in, or is that just?
Yeah, so I at that time I was running the 47 through a Neve 1073,
Okay.
and I'm very lucky to have a CL1B as well, which I left on for probably way longer than I should have, and it's just a very very warm big sound going in. Um, and I usually have the needle in the middle, uh, so it's typically really fast attack, and slow to long release, or slow release on the CL1B. Um, and just going in it, pretty hot into UAD. And let's see what else I was using. Pultec, yeah, I was using Pultec a lot at the time. I've switched more to using the precision from UAD, but I think I was just looking for a bit of that more like analog grit in the high end, so I leaned on that a lot. And then I think we even did a third round of, well, VMS isn't going to load, of course, but I did some more compression with that, and I loved this Revival plugin that's inside of VMR.
Mm.
That I just added some extra shine at the end, but that's what the vocal chain's looking like.
Dang. Sounds great. Can we hear the pre-chorus with everything in it?
Sure, yeah, and it looks like the backgrounds. Let me see. Oh,
Or yeah, is there anything else that in that pre that we're
that's,
missing?
I think we just didn't hear a lot because they were frozen, so we're gonna have some more
Ooh.
friends joining the party. Let's see.
Don't think twice. You'll be dead in a second. Turn your eyes from your hands to the heavens.
Those for sure weren't in the song, so those are going back.
Dude, a little sneak peek.
Muted for a reason.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, it was just these.
You'll be dead in a second. From your hands to the heavens.
With everything.
Blood running through your veins. Don't think twice. You'll be dead in a second. Turn your eyes from your hands to the heavens. Kill your pride. Turn your fear to a weapon. And don't you forget it. Oh, don't you let him take.
It's actually really interesting now that you unmuted those tracks, because you saw exactly what we were talking about before, where you were adding layers and layers and layers of these vocals, and then it sounds like you just stripped it back down to just one vocal, right?
Yeah, so that's my process is really throwing every idea at the wall. I'm never one to like clip my own wings when it comes to adding a bunch of production elements. In fact, I'll show you down here. Oh my goodness, there's got to be there's so many. I mean, if I start soloing these, I got who knows what this is. Let's find out. What are you? Some like horrifically ugly synth thing. Let's see what this is. Oh yeah, I was auditioning more aggressive X8 patches for the bass. But I realized again at the end I had done all the drums on the MPC, and I had found an 808 inside of the MPC that I loved. It was like this ugly, splatty, like super you could tell it was bleeding through because I was tracking the 1073. I was using the 1073 DIs to track the MPC and kind of frying it on the way in, and you can just hear it kind of. That's disgusting. It's just that's not how an 808 should sound.
Yeah, it's broken.
And it's going through all this stuff. So it's sidechained to the kick, through the bus. We use L2 on everything. My buddy Boone, who's an unbelievable producer, helped me mix this. And he's a much more into limiting than I was kind of privy to at the time. So was using that on the bass, and then
Shout out,
what
boom.
else? Shout out to Boone. Oh, look, a weird EQ curve. This is awesome.
The dirty
Um,
laundry.
Dirty Laundry. Yeah, I don't know what I think the low end was just so oppressive on this that we actually had to just basically do a low cut up to like 75 on an 808. But in context with everything, I'll solo the drum bus real quick. The most organized project file award in history goes to made these two kicks layered. I think I bounced into one. this down. I'm a huge fan of, in that sound card in the MPC, there's hundreds and hundreds of snares. There's DMX snares, there's Dilla snares, there's ones that are thin and big and thick, ones with resonance, ones that are tight. And I think the way I've always found the strongest snare sounds is just by finding two or three that each have a character that I love, and then just finding a balance between those three. So in this case, I had one that was a little bitier from the MPC. Just kind of had like it almost feels like it's coming from like a mouth noise
Mm.
a little bit. And then this one that's way thicker, and then one with a little more resonance. Little shaker on it.
Mm.
Um, and then these hats, which are kind of drunken. See, they're just kind of hanging out behind. I like to just, even if I track something, um, yeah, I'll do one of two things. If I track something through MIDI, I love to really just manually mess with humanizing it, or just not quantize it a bunch. But in this song, it was one of those cases where I kind of committed pretty fully to tracking it on the MPC and then not really messing with the quantization at all,
Mm.
in the post. And I think it's kind of why the song feels like it kind of just trods along and feels like a little broken and a little weird, in a way that kind of reinforces the anxiousness of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the silence in this song is just as important as like the sound. And so I can imagine it was probably a little risky to do it where it's not perfectly quantized, right? Because if you're stepping on those silences at all, it's going to take away from the song. But then it does add this little element of like it feels more human than like the very in the box kind of pop stuff that you'll hear that is kind of in this vein.
For sure. And there's a really weird one of my favorite elements in the production is this. It's a really weird bass sound. I'm pretty sure this is the stem. It felt, this is so corny. It felt super Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
We wrote this around Halloween, and I was like having this almost aggressive guitar processed kind of 808 leading in to that 808 in the post hook, with all the vocals going on in the back. It just felt really haunting.
So, one thing.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. One thing
No, no, you're good.
for our students, like the one thing that's really hard to kind of get across to students when they're first getting involved in production is that it's not the sheer amount of things that you put into a track. It's how you're able to actually conserve frequencies and come up with a sonically balanced track. Where did you learn that? Because even what you're doing with some of these things with like saturation and kind of taking some of the hi-hats and making them distorted and everything, it theoretically is wrong, but in practice, when you put everything together, you get this really balanced, sonically balanced track. So where did you develop that skill set? Was that self-taught or?
So yeah, honestly, when I was growing up, I never really took any courses, which, to be honest, I probably should have. And if you had your resource, back then, I probably would have been a huge fan of that. But at the time, it was just a lot of trial and error of why aren't my mixers loud enough?
Hmm.
Like why, there's all these big sounds are in my song, and I feel like this should sound so big, but when I compare it to songs that I listen to on Spotify, this is a very common plight that I'm sure you deal with all the
Yep.
time, which is like, why, like kids probably come to you and they're like, why, I'm using these huge sounding samples and in the box it sounds huge, but then I bounce my mix out and it feels so much quieter or just so much less tight, than the stuff that's on Spotify. But then when I compress it, or like when I do mix bus compression and stuff, it feels like it kills that emotion and it makes it bigger, but it doesn't feel like it has the punch that the songs that I
Yeah.
love do. And something that I've learned, and I'm still learning even past this song, and into the new stuff that I'm working on, is just being really, really critical about what frequencies I need to hear from each sound. I was in a lucky place with this song where even the brightest sounds in the melodic production, which are those strings in the pre-chorus, are very necessary to hear that breath because the vocals got the "you'll be dead in a second," but all the way through the hook, these are all very for the most part, dark and ugly, kind of, even those. And there's only three elements above that in the melodic production. There's this pedal string, which is just a trem string that goes through the whole hook. And then
what you just said could literally save some student or some young producer who's getting into this could literally save 5 years of trial and error. So if you can maybe reiterate one more time, like your relationship with frequencies, how do you know exactly what to get out of each instrument? How do you think through that? Because I think it more than anything, that's what we hear from our students all the time.
I think listen to, this sounds so corny, but listen to your heart with, first of all, before you're talking and deciding about what frequencies to leave in the song, or in each sound. Ask yourself, is this instrument necessary? This is something that I did not do for years. I would throw everything at the wall. Like you can see, like I allow myself to get everything out of my system and try a bunch of ideas, and I'm never creatively restrictive on like this song needs to be this. But when you're sitting with all the raw materials and you sit with the song for a bit, you get this magic point in the process of a song where you regain a little bit of objectivity, where you're not so in the micro and you get to zoom out to the macro. It's sometimes near the end stage of production where you've really fleshed out a lot of your ideas and are approaching mixing, or even you're starting to print stuff down and consolidate a little bit. There's this magic moment, and you can't script it and you can't really get it back, where you get to kind of zoom out and be like, okay, what is the key emotion of this song? What am I trying to convey? With this song, I wanted this kind of haunting, dark, aggression to the whole thing. And there were a bunch of sounds that I had, like those super aggressive basses, which felt like, whoa, this is like way more rock and too aggressive. It ruins some of the trepid, like looking around anxiousness of it. So that's going in the back. And maybe some of the really bright sounds or the extra vocals that were in the pre, too much. We don't need all that. It's this moment where you first, before thinking about frequencies, you get into the guts of the song, be like, okay, I've had the chance to flesh this out. Let's peel everything back and be like, what really reinforces the emotions of this song? And when you're left with that, you may be surprised that it's only 30% of the stems that you were originally working with. And then you look at that and go, okay, for instance, let me find an example so I'm not just, what section would be best?
This is great. I can't tell you how prevalent this is as a problem.
I think here's a good example. So in the pre, I had all these elements, which were the ones that I showed you, the basses and then the staccato strings. I was missing, when I had consolidated everything down to that, I was like, it feels just a little bit too aggressive. I want something that's a question mark. Like I want something that's a little bit more emotional. And I was at Henson Studios, and they have this amazing piano there. And I was like, I just want some sustained, really light pianos that you can't even hear in the song. You can hear the stereo on them. But in context, even though it's, they're peaking at -15, it's this little bit of emotional glue behind all these rough edges that kind of helps fuse everything together.
That's fascinating.
Don't think twice. You'll be dead in a second. Turn your eyes from your hands to the heavens. Kill your pride. Turn your feet.
They probably should have been louder. You can't really hear it, but when I was getting to the end of production, I was like, it's just a little too gritty. I want something to kind of fuse it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy. So when I ask you that question, most people would say something super technical, but you're saying kind of lead with emotion, which it's so easy when you get into the nitty gritty and you're in the middle of producing a track. It's so easy to just start picking sounds and saying, this would be cool, this would be cool, this would be cool. But going back to that emotional intent and leading with that as a way to kind of, in a weird way, using emotion to come back to the objectivity to be able to say, like, this doesn't fit, That's really an interesting way of looking at it. Um, yeah, that's super informative.
I think that like all that anyone has like think about this in an era of limitless samples, limitless VSTs. I mean, the amount of amazing sound that we have access to create with, none of us have excuses to not write, great stuff. But the problem is, it's the paradox of choice. It's like there's so many options, and so many. There's always going to be a better sound. There
Mm,
will literally always be a better sound if you have made the best beat of your life. Somewhere in a corner of a Reddit drum pack, there is a snare that will hit harder. There is an 808 sample that will you can hear better on an iPhone speaker. And so then it comes to like all that we really have is our personal tastes and our flavor profile and our influences and like what has bled into our music and allowed us to fall in love with it in the first place. And so the whole arc of my career started on a technical level. So I think it's so important to learn about how to use tools, how to use the basics, how to use EQ and compression and saturation, and big crushers and all these things. Because initially, when I first started, it was all trying to recreate my favorite songs. So it was really learning the technical aspects. But then the harder part is when you get into creating your own things, respecting the tools and continuing to use them, but using them in ways that they weren't intended to help your flavor and your taste
mm.
come to life. And using technical tools in a creative way to simplify what you're creating and then make something that only you could come up with.
I'm gonna clip that out and I'm gonna send that to all of our students because you're gonna save them a lot of time. So what you just said is gonna impact a lot of people. So,
That makes me really happy.
so if you can take us to the chorus now, because I think
Sure.
same thing. It's huge, right? I'm so curious to see what you
So
did there.
I'll play that last. And part of the reason it feels huge is it's an illusion too, because you come out of this single dry vocal line, and then you get all the elements at once.
And don't you forget it. Oh, don't you let him take control. Don't you let him break your soul. It's not the devil at your door. It's just your shadow on the floor.
So there's three things that come to mind with this hook that if we're in the spirit of like saving time, of just kind of being stuck in, technical purgatory, the three things are this. One, then this is so obvious, but that melody that we had at the intro, we were like, that feels so good. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's have that be the whole post-chorus melody.
It's just your shadow on the floor. It's just your shadow on
And
the floor.
just backing that up, it almost feels like a wolf call. It's like, yeah, it's. Let me see this. I forgot. I forgot that was in such a. In my head, I thought I remembered putting that in a hall, but it's in this like little woody 18.18 second Valhalla wood room.
It's so good, dude. It's so funny because it's like the essence of spooky. I can imagine like if I was trying to scare my wife in the house late at night or so, those would be the sounds you'd be like, woo,
It's yeah, it's funny. It just felt like that was the
it's
when we
perfect.
got to that post, we were like, let's just not reinvent the wheel. We have a melody we love. Let's stick to it.
Can you
And
put
then so yeah,
Sorry, super quick on just that part that you played right there where you were singing over that lead melody. Is there any processing on that, or is that just pretty raw?
yeah. So it looks like I'm automating to an altar boy, and automating to a vintage verb throw.
Because the performance on all of this stuff sounds amazing. Like it's not the production's amazing, the frequency stuff is amazing, but the performance also is just killer. So I'd love to just
Thank
hear
you so
that.
much. Yeah.
It's just your shadow on the floor.
Yeah,
just your shadow.
it's funny. I find it strange I didn't do a longer verb on that, but it just you can't really tell on the song. On the hook, these harmonies are all another felt not heard thing, but because it's only two chords really for the entire song, um, there were notes we still hadn't really hit or reinforced anywhere, and that's where these were really fun to play with. I'll just solo these.
Don't you let him take control. Don't you let him break your soul. It's not the devil at your door.
There's a lot going on there.
Mm. So
Specifically, like these ones are super weird. Let me see what's even on this bus. It's a bunch of weird, different harmony layers going through different buses to kind of distort and mutilate it.
it's almost like there's two different songs going on. It's like Stranger Things. You've got the real song, and then you've got the upside down, which is kind of like this like
Sure.
distorted kind of. It sounds like it's existing in this other reality, and the bouncing back and forth between those two, and then when they come together, it's really cool.
Thank you. It's fun because I think this was one of the few songs where, not by any of my own doing, but I had so much space to play with because of the drums being so dark and heavy and the and really everything being out of the way in the high end in the chorus. There's just all this room for the vocal and different effects around these backgrounds to kind of live and breathe.
Oh, don't you let him take control. Don't you let him
There's one
break
harmony I love in there.
control.
Not that one.
Don't
To you.
control. Don't
It's
you
like
let him break
we'll find you.
control.
Yeah, there's like one walking up and one down, but it's it's hard to describe. But when you get into this is the most I can condense the idea of when you find an idea that you really really love, and I knew I loved this song. I was really obsessed with it when I was making it, which is ironic because later I completely fell out of love with it and wasn't going to put it out, wasn't going to put it out at all. Which also another thing, if you have something you love at one point and your gut is freaking out over it for any length of time, don't throw it away. It might change your life. Uh,
Ah,
I was gonna throw this away, and literally gonna throw it away. I thought it was like corny and like too youthful and like too like spooky Halloweeny, and people just totally chose this one for whatever reason. So if you have something in your gut, use that for two things. One, trust it, put it out, sculpt it, make it everything it needs to be, but don't over perfectionize everything. Just give what you create to the world. But then also, when you slip into the state with a song where you know what it is, you're like, I'm not like between four things or five emotions, but like, you know what, this song isn't going to be everything to everyone, but it's 100% this thing. Uh, that's where you start having all these ideas about how to use the technical skills to embellish and build a world inside of that song, and it gets so much fun.
wow. Yeah, you're saving. I mean, this is going to be incredible. People are going to get so much value out of it. So yeah, so we'll take us through. So we did pre-chorus and then the rest of the song. So how do you? I guess my question would be like, you've got this incredible hook, you've got this melody, you've got these sounds. How do you maintain that sort of movement and direction, especially on a song like this, which is very kind of like marching, kind of plotty kind of feel?
Yes.
How do you keep it from getting 2.5 minutes in and being like, oh my gosh, get me out of here?
It's I have no idea. It's hard. I'm actually not fully sure that I did it.
I think
The
you
song
did.
actually the song might get a little lost in the second half, but there are a couple things that help it in the second verse. One is like a more standard songwriting thing, which is like second half of your second verse, really deviate and do something fun. So we had this.
Cleaver if they follow you whenever night falls. We used to listen to my call. Who do you trust in knowing it all? Knowing it all.
And the other thing is something that Lou Bell, I just always, I'm a Lou Bell fanboy. I just think he's one of the greatest producers and vocal engineers maybe to ever live. And I've been listening to him since way before he even worked with Post Malone. I was listening to him when he was doing these Mike Stud tracks in like 2015 that had there's like incredible like samples and sound design and vocal production. And he's so good with in the second verses and all over the post choruses, always just having ear candy, verbed out, really beautiful vocals just to kind of keep you interested. So that's what I kind of tried to lean in on over
Eye
here.
on the clock.
Mm.
Yeah, so there's just a Seventh Heaven bus on that. There's a lexicon bus and a H delay. And it just kind of sits really washed out all the way behind the lead and the sides. And let me check out what these harms are too.
One eye on the mirror, take a
It's just like weird low.
Is it?
Something that I also I told Boone about this with the last album is um sometimes my strategy with background vocals are to make them sound as bad as possible. Like if the lead is so tight and so and you're doing a comp on it that takes a million years, like sometimes it's nice to have like some rough one take, like sort of in the ballpark BGs, just to make it feel human.
Yeah, are you comping your vocals aggressively? Because there's this ongoing discussion between do you comp a ton, do you do a one take type deal? Where do you stand
Tons.
on that?
I comp I comp like a monster. I comp so much. I mean, let's see what these let's look at the pre. I mean, there's probably
Hmm.
I do so many takes. I mean, this is light. I do a weird, strange, inadvisable amount of takes, like 20 takes of each section, 20 to 30, and then it usually ends up in the last 10. I'll find the sections that I love. Um, and I've since moved to Pro Tools for comping because I really do like granularly being able to kind of shift around like word by word stuff. But honestly, for this whole album, it was just using Logic's comping, and then I like to commit, bounce it out so I can do some fades and some automations on it.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of my approach to comping, but I never really try to comp. Like I said, backgrounds tend to stay. As you can see, these are all one take backgrounds. Even on the first verse, I like to kind of
Yeah.
not change the human or even badness of background comps too much.
It's fascinating. One thing I just wanted to highlight too was that you said when you think about creating movement in the second half of the song, again, there's always this pull to be like, oh, I'm going to pull in new sounds or I'm going to add
Right.
more layers. But instead, you go back to the most core thing, which is the songwriting, and you say, how can we make this be dynamic and change so that everything else doesn't necessarily have to pull the weight to keep people's interest? And that, I know that sounds like a small distinction, but for
Sure.
young producers that are coming up in a world where you said like they have access to anything and everything, it's really hard to think of that like first principles mentality where it's like go back to the core
Yeah.
thing and build out from there. So I just wanted to underline that because I think it's incredibly useful.
That's what you just said. I mean, that would have saved me so much time. Because again, it's the most difficult thing ever is what should I do?
Yeah.
Like that question, the well, what do I do now? Like I have an idea that I like and or whatever the crossroads is. There's so many. There's going to be in any project, even a song that's going to change your life, like including this one for me is like there's a lot of what do I do now, and no one can answer that for you. That's the long dark night of the soul as a creator is what principles are you operating on when you hit those
Mm.
what do I do nows? And for the longest time, when I was much younger of a writer and a producer, it was my palette, right? It's like I knew I loved strings and some of these weird patches and the trons and so it was just kind of this just the color palette that I like to use. And that was the substrate for the longest time where it was like when I don't know what to do, I go over here. But then the more that I fell in love with songwriting and wrote more and more songs, I came to realize that when a song is really, really strong, it typically is a lot easier to produce
Mm.
because you're thinking less and less about injecting more novelty into it and more about, oh my gosh, this song and this concept makes me feel so many things. What if it's like, oh, it kind of feels 80s, like let's go mess with a Juno, or like this, it feels so cinematic and beautiful in this part. What if there's some tension, like a great idea and starting like with the big rock of the idea or a great vocal performance at the core of it, that will naturally start to set off those connections where you're like, oh yeah, I know how to serve this idea. Like when I go into production on my songs, I'm not thinking the same way as when I'm writing the song. I'm thinking, how can I, first of all, I'm thinking critically, do I believe in this idea that songwriter me wrote? Like, is it really that, or is it gonna get, am I gonna give it my attention? And if the answer is yes, how do I really serve the emotion of this, specifically with the sounds inside of it?
Yeah.
And it gets a lot easier there.
I think that's brilliant, man. And I think if you look, I was talking to you before we started filming, but if you look at your entire career all the way back to your tracks from 4 years ago, I think that intentionality is like the thing that's the common through point, where it's like everything sounds how you wanted it to sound because you led kind of with the emotional intent. And so even if the sounds change, there's still a thread that you can kind of follow through that because it's all just you, you know?
Thank you. That means a lot to me, and I think, also it's be a be a collector. I collect inspiration from so many different
Mm.
places, and from, I'll watch movies and hear weird sound effects in the back, and like I think that you can, for anyone watching this, it's like take weird little risks in your production, or that, once you have the big rocks done, like I think it's almost like it's kind of like earn the cheat day a little
Mm.
bit. It's like get the big rocks done, the main sounds, the core things that reinforce the song. For this song, it was that staccato piano that happens right at the beginning, and the ooze, just these guys.
Right.
The basses and the strings, and then the pedal on the hook with the strings and I think that when you start with a foundation like that, you're like tonally, this takes me somewhere. I see the space, I close my eyes, it takes me somewhere. It just unlocks so many more places for you to go and add the little sound treats and the weird, like all these weird sound effects and stuff in the drums, like it's like weird. It kind of sparks your brain to go in another direction, I guess.
Yeah, dude, amazing. This is going to be so helpful for so many of the students and so many of the viewers from our channel. Are we missing anything? Is there anything else you wanted to go over, or is this?
No, rest of the song's boring. Didn't change anything. I think there's probably more Henson pianos that no one's ever gonna hear. Oh, these are kind of cool. Yeah, no, that's yeah, it's another
Wow,
one of those things. It's like I don't even think you can hear these in the song. Let me see.
it's so beautiful.
They're definitely in there. I forgot those were there. Those probably should have. I'm gonna own a mistake there. Those definitely should have been louder. And then these outro ones. But again, just recycled the pre. See if there's anything else that I even really added. No, just kind of committed to the same sounds through the rest of it.
Oh,
Um, yeah, that's the song. That's Shadow.
oh, it's beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And yeah, I'm such a huge fan of yours. So let the viewers know you're out on tour now. Is that right?
Going on tour on Monday, driving to rehearsal from here. If you want to come, we'll probably still be playing shows by the time you see this. So
Amazing.
you can go get tickets at livingstonofficial.com/tour.
Are you coming through Nashville?
I don't think so. It's
Dang,
beat markets this time.
dang it. Okay. Next time. Cool. And then socials. Where's the best place to find you?
Just at Livingston on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. I can't express enough how much I appreciate it. And we're all pulling for you. And
Thank you so much.
next time you come through Nashville, you best believe I'll be at one of the shows.
Thank you so much for your time and your platform. And I hope to anyone watching that there's like 10 seconds of a soundbite that might be somewhat useful and save you a little time because this is just it's such a fun journey to be on and finding your own sound. And best of luck to all of you.
Livingston, everyone, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Thank you, guys.